I, Scott John Morrison, do swear that I will well and truly serve the people of Australia in the office of Prime Minister, and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of Australia, so help me God.
Japanese scientists just cloned a few hundred mice from a single drop of blood.
We bring you Dr. Joy Pugh. Dr. Joy, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, when I first started writing my books, the first one was Antichrist, the clone image of Jesus Christ, and it was really about the Shroud of Turin. And it was about the Shroud of Turin and the reality of that there was a cloth that existed back according to Scripture. In 1337, the first known shroud owner was Geoffrey de Carne, who was a Knight Templar. And there's some speculation he actually was the ancestor of Geoffrey de Charny, Temple Master of Normandy, who was burned at the stake with Jacques de Molay, who was a Templar Grand Master. The shroud was also displayed in a local church, really important to remember. The shroud itself was first known as the cloth of Edessa, and it was hidden in the Edessa wall for protection by the Christians. In other words, when likely the disciples and the people that were there had that cloth. But at the same time, as time went on, they were always so afraid these people would come in and take whatever. It's like when the Temple Mount, when the temple was destroyed in 70 A.D., they went in, they just took everything. And then you had the Knights Templar in there trying to get pieces of the cross and pieces of this and so and so's bones and whatever and the gold and that kind of thing. So the Christians were trying to save these things, save these relics that they knew to be true. So the cloth actually became called the cloth of Edessa. And if you go back and you look at one of these Gregorian manuscripts, it was actually written in 500 A.D., which was 500 years after the death of Jesus. Byzantine armies found the shroud and brought it to Constantinople around 944 A.D. And it says that even the coins that were struck during the reign of Justinian had the face of Jesus that bear a resemblance to that shroud. The shroud is also mentioned in a sermon by Archdeacon called Gregory at Hagia Sophia Cathedral in 944 A.D., as well as within texts penned by Nicholas Mesorites, overseer of the Imperial Relic Treasury in Constantinople during 1201 A.D. Constantinople was destroyed by French Crusaders in 1204 A.D., and the famous shroud went missing. Researchers surmise it passed around to different emperors and was given back to the Templars, specifically to the House of Charny, during the Crusades. It was Charnay's marriage to a French Crusaders family that allowed the House of Charny to own the shroud. The House of Charny then, through marriages, passed the shroud to the House of Savoy until it was bequeathed to Pope John Paul II and his successors in 1983. And the image on it appears to be some type of burst of radiation on the cloth that actually left the perfect image of a crucified Christ. So, and you look at this image of Christ, it's estimated that he's about 6'2", weighs about 178 pounds, and that the wounds on the body are those that have been detailed in Scripture as having occurred to Jesus during the crucifixion. And what I mean by that is that the whippings that he took with a cat of nine tails that just literally tore the flesh off of his back and his legs, you can clearly see that on the Shroud of Turin image. The crown of thorns that was on his head left an imprint of where those thorns pierced his head, and on the Shroud of Turin you can see that. The nail prints that are in the wrist and in the feet are very visible on the shroud, and then the wound from the spear that went into his side when he was hanging on the cross, and they wanted to make sure he was dead, where the pericardial fluid was dumped out on the side when they stuck the spear into him. All of that is literally on that cloth and actually in great detail. And, of course, on that shroud, there is just huge amounts of blood. And scientists really that looked at it concluded that that DNA that was found on the shroud actually belonged to a Jewish male. And according to them, they duplicated the pairs of that DNA strand, and they isolated those DNA strands from blood. So the fact that this was going on, back in the like I said, early or late 1969 and up until 1978, they had the blood samples. The Stirrup Committee cloned those blood samples to look at those blood samples. All that was established in the Stirrup Committee's report. To the samples that Ron White got off of that, what he believed was the Ark of the Covenant's mercy seat, only had one Y chromosome. And supposedly he allowed those things to be tested and to analyze all of that. And some of his research actually shows that when you look at it, the blood is not dead. It's absolutely alive.
Because they can trace every human person back to an original mitochondrial DNA of a woman. Eve, and they call it Eve, interesting enough. Science actually calls it an Eve. But what's happening is, instead of it being hundreds of thousands of years ago, we're looking at about 6,000 years ago.
Cloning is nothing. You take an egg out of a woman, you just take the DNA out of the egg, you take a skin cell, blood cell, whatever, you pop it in that egg, and then you put it back in the woman, and in 9 months, she produces a child. How is it that somebody could come into this world right now and fool a lot of people? Well, we know that the Catholic Church has been having, the images of Jesus on their statues cry. They've had them bleed. They've had Mother Mary cry. I mean, people would flock and supposedly get healed and had to have pilgrimages. And, if anybody hasn't ever read the incident of Fatima, and I write about that in my book Eden in detail, there's just these little miracle kind of things that are going on that they've been doing all along, kind of getting you ready to worship an image. It would be an image. It would be a person without a soul walking around who looked like Jesus. Then if you cloned Jesus and you had his body, Satan would be literally walking in the temple of God, proclaiming himself that he was God. So when Prince William, when Diana and Charles got together, weird situation, that she was of the age, she's supposed to be a 19 virgin, that there was these witchcraft things going on, that people were waiting for the Antichrist to be born. You got things like Rosemary's Baby. I mean, all this kind of stuff is just kind of weirdly connected to Camelot and the Holy Grail and blood, and that one day, according to the Camelot story, the king that once was is going to be born again as a child. I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh. Right. So when William was being carried by Diana, he was in her womb. Weird situation as to how that happened. She began trying to kill herself with her pregnant so that he would not be born. And then at his baptism, they threw the holy water on him, and according to the people that were there, he howled. Well, that word just really bothered me, because having really an understanding of studying demonology and wicked, when holy water is thrown on something that's wicked, it reacts weird. Really weird. It's about William that happened as a young man. He got hit in the head, really a bad deal. And, if you stop and think about it, most people that get that kind of injury don't end up being okay. And he's still got a mark, a scar, which the Harry Potter series, I think, kind of emulates. But we can talk about that, too, about Harry Potter and how that kind of is the same play-off of witchcraft and royalty and that kind of thing, maybe on our next show. The fact that he had head injury and he survived that head injury, it tells us that Antichrist is going to get a wound, and he will live. There's all these little things that kind of stand out that has happened in the course of him and what happened to Diana. And when you understand that Diana stood, in front of Jane Pauley on a television show and tried to tell everybody that, was listening. What the problem was is most people don't understand that they're, like you and I have been preaching, that there's a serpent lineage here with us. And she literally stood on national television and said those people were lizards. I mean, she literally said it. I was watching the show.
Right.
And it's documented in my book, Eating the Knowledge of Good and Evil. She made these comments like that. She knew that she was being used as a birthing chamber. She even said that. How people that were around him talked about he was wiser, as like an old man in a young body. People that have shared with me that's been around him in the military, the personification that he gives and the eeriness that he has, that there is something uniquely, strangely different about him. The fact that he's the 1,000th person of the Order of the Garter, and that being the highest level. The Queen is the wealthiest person in the entire world, and the Vatican is the third wealthiest. And that if you put both of them together, they're the wealthiest. They control everything. Their hands are in everything.
If you're a Christian, you want to be caught away. You do not want to be left in that little gap of period of time, because that's going to be, I believe, the destruction of the stuff that I really saw as a child. That is horrific.